Take a breath. For 8 consecutive days, I've been standing here talking about tornadoes, about squall lines, about flash floods, about EF4s and PDS warnings and 175 mph winds and rivers rising 22 feet in 2 hours. For 8 days, the atmosphere has been throwing punches at this country in a relentless, exhausting, occasionally deadly sequence that has left communities from Oklahoma to Michigan to Texas picking through the damage. And today, Wednesday, April 29th, 2026, something is shifting, something is changing. The atmosphere is not going quiet in the way people are hoping it is. It is going cold, and it is going cold fast. And in doing so, it is about to deliver a completely different kind of weather that almost nobody is prepared for, because nobody is thinking about it. They are all still watching the tornado radar. The WPC's short-range forecast discussion issued this morning confirms a cold front will bring cooler, below-average temperatures to most of the central and eastern United States, while the western U.S. trends warmer over the next few days. Cooler and below-average temperatures for the central and eastern U.S. right now, starting today, on the heels of a week that ran 10 to 15 degrees above normal across much of the same region. The same warmth that loaded the atmosphere with the Gulf moisture that fueled 8 consecutive days of violent storms, that warmth is about to be replaced, abruptly, by something that is going to catch millions of people completely off guard. The weather shift is here, and it is about to surprise everyone. Let me explain exactly why, and exactly who needs to be paying attention right now. Let me start with what is happening right now, because the speed of this pattern change is the first thing that catches people off guard. Over the next 24 to 36 hours, a developing upper-level low over the Great Lakes is forecast to drive a cold front and weak waves of low pressure across the eastern seaboard and Gulf Coast states. A swath of showers and thunderstorms from the Ohio Valley and mid-Atlantic to south-central Texas will precede the cold front today ahead of its passage. A cold front is crossing the central and eastern U.S. right now. Behind it, a fundamentally different air mass, drier, cooler, completely unlike the humid, unstable tropical air that has been fueling the storm sequence all week. This is not a gradual seasonal transition. This is an abrupt boundary. On one side, the warm, moist Gulf air that gave this country 8 days of violent weather. On the other, a cold, dense continental air mass that is about to change the character of the atmosphere completely. Kentucky Weather Center meteorologist Chris Bailey confirmed Wednesday morning that the rounds of strong to severe storms targeting Kentucky through tonight will move away, leaving a much cooler pattern setting up for Kentucky Derby weekend. The complete weather character change arrives within 24 to 48 hours across the Ohio Valley. Kentucky Derby weekend. Saturday, May 2nd. One of the most iconic outdoor sporting events in America, an event that draws 150,000 people to Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky, an event where people spend thousands of dollars on outfits carefully chosen for warm spring weather, is being forecast by the region's meteorologists as dramatically cooler than what anyone is expecting, on the heels of a week that felt more like early June than late April. The people who booked their Derby weekend plans in the context of April's record warmth are about to receive a very different forecast than the one they were expecting. And that is just the beginning of the surprises in this shift. Now I need to talk about the thing that I genuinely believe is the most underappreciated weather safety threat of this entire week. Not the remaining severe weather. Not the Texas flooding, something that sounds far less dramatic but could cost farmers and gardeners across the Ohio Valley and Northeast their entire early season investment in a single overnight. A hard freeze threat is building for the period from Thursday, April 30th through Sunday, May 3rd, across a broad corridor stretching from the Central Plains through the Ohio Valley into the northern Mid-Atlantic and interior Northeast. Let me explain why that specific timing is so dangerous for this specific year. April 2026 has been extraordinary in its warmth. The WPC confirmed that the central and eastern U.S. ran 10 to 15 degrees above normal through much of the month. NOAA's NWS Rio Grande Valley office confirmed that 2026 is picking up where 2025 left off, as the year is off to a hot start, with consistent days of unseasonably warm temperatures and a lack of February Arctic Express outbreak events contributing to record warmth across the southern tier. That warmth extended well north. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Pennsylvania, New York all ran well above normal through April. And that warmth triggered something that is now about to become a serious problem: phenological advancement. Phenological advancement means that plants, trees, and crops responded to the warmth by doing what they biologically do when it's warm. They grew, they budded, they leafed out, they bloomed. The apple orchards of Ohio and Pennsylvania that normally wait until early May to flower are already in full bloom. The peach orchards of Georgia and the Carolinas that were waiting for warmer conditions planted early. The vegetable gardeners across the Ohio Valley, who were emboldened by April's record warmth and put their tomatoes, peppers, and squash in the ground 2 or 3 weeks ahead of their normal schedules, They have seedlings in the ground right now. Columbus, Ohio sits around April 30th as its average last frost date. A last frost date is a historical average, the point in time when frost has occurred 50% of the time in past years. That leaves the other half of years as fair game for surprises. In Ohio, locations in the Northeast can experience freezing temperatures as late as mid-May. Cold April weather can delay soil warm-up and jeopardize early planted corn, wreaking havoc on horticultural interests, especially following early season warmth where phenological conditions may be advanced. April 30th is the average last frost date for Columbus, Ohio, which means today, April 29th, is statistically still within the frost window for Ohio's capital city. And the CPC has confirmed temperature anomalies of 10 to 20 degrees below normal for the Central Plains through the Appalachians from April 30th through May 3rd. 10 to 20 degrees below normal, starting tomorrow, in a year when plants are already 2 to 3 weeks ahead of their normal development schedule because of April's record warmth. Cold April weather can delay the warm-up of soils and jeopardize early planted corn, wreaking havoc on horticultural interests, especially following early season warmth where phenological conditions may be advanced for the time of year. This is weather whiplash in its most agriculturally devastating form. A month of record warmth that coaxes plants to bloom and grow weeks ahead of schedule, followed immediately by a hard freeze that catches every one of those advanced plants in their most vulnerable state. A fully opened apple blossom can be killed by temperatures as warm as 28 degrees Fahrenheit. A tomato seedling that has been in the ground for 2 weeks in 70-degree weather has no cold hardening whatsoever. A corn seedling that has just emerged from drought-stressed soil in Iowa cannot survive a 26-degree night in early May. And that is exactly the scenario that is now in the forecast for large portions of the agricultural heartland. I want to be specific and direct about this because the window to act is today and tomorrow, not this weekend when the freeze is already arriving. For fruit orchardists in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, Michigan, and the surrounding Mid-Atlantic and Great Lakes states, your orchards are in a phenologically advanced state right now because of April's warmth. Apple blossoms that are at or past peak bloom are vulnerable to frost damage at temperatures between 28 and 32 degrees. Peach trees in open bloom can be damaged at temperatures below 29 degrees. Brief cold snaps are still possible even after earlier than normal last frost dates. The 2026 last frost date map shows broad swaths of the Ohio Valley and Northeast in the earlier than normal category, which creates opportunities for earlier garden activity but also means brief cold snaps remain a real possibility. If you have frost protection systems, wind machines, overhead irrigation, orchard heaters, test them today. Do not wait until Thursday night when the temperatures are already dropping. The window to prepare is today. For vegetable gardeners across the Ohio Valley, Pennsylvania, New York, and New England who planted early in April's warmth, if you have tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, cucumbers, squash, beans, or basil in the ground, any warm season crop, cover them before Thursday night. Row covers, frost cloth, or even old bed sheets can provide the 4 to 6 degrees of frost protection that makes the difference between a damaged plant and a dead one. Move any container plants indoors or to a protected area. The seedlings you planted in April's warmth have never experienced cold stress. They have zero cold hardening. A single night at 28 degrees can kill months of work in a few hours. Patience in late April and early May almost always pays off. A last frost date is a historical average. There is still a chance of frost after the listed date. Free tools from the National Weather Service and apps that show hourly temperature breakdowns give a meaningful heads up before a cold snap arrives. If a forecast shows lows dipping into the low 30s even once in the coming week, that is reason enough to hold off on putting tender plants in the ground or to have protective covers ready. The NWS is your tool. Check the hourly forecast for your specific location each morning through this weekend. Watch for lows in the low 30s or below, and act before the cold arrives, not the morning after when you survey the damage. For corn and soybean farmers in Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and Missouri who planted early, cold April weather can delay the warm-up of soils and jeopardize early planted corn. A hard freeze following early season warmth where phenological conditions are advanced represents one of the more damaging agricultural weather scenarios for early planted cornfields. Corn seedlings that have just emerged are vulnerable to freeze damage. The extent of the damage depends on how low temperatures fall for how long and whether the growing point, which is below ground for young corn, is exposed. For emerged corn in the V1 to V3 stage, temperatures below 28 degrees Fahrenheit for more than a few hours can cause significant leaf damage and stand loss. Monitor your fields closely through this weekend and consult with your county extension office about replanting decisions if damage is observed. I want to spend a moment on the Kentucky Derby specifically because it is one of those cultural events where the weather forecast has enormous practical consequences for millions of people. And this year's Derby forecast is going to catch a lot of people by surprise. The 152nd Kentucky Derby runs Saturday, May 2nd at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. The Kentucky Weather Center confirmed that the Derby weekend will feature a much cooler pattern than the warm spring conditions Louisville experienced through most of April, with the complete weather character change arriving within 24 to 48 hours across the Ohio Valley. Churchill Downs holds approximately 150,000 spectators on Derby Day. It is an outdoor event. The fashion traditions of Derby, the sundresses, the linen suits, the elaborate hats, are designed for warm spring weather. And this year, with April running 10 to 15 degrees above normal across the Ohio Valley, many people planning to attend made their wardrobe decisions in a context of unseasonable warmth. The cold snap arriving Thursday through the weekend is going to dramatically change the feel of Derby Day compared to what people experienced throughout April. Major changes are on the way to end April and begin May, all of which start with a severe weather threat to begin Kentucky Derby Week, with chilly conditions following. If you have Derby tickets, or if you are attending any outdoor events in the Ohio Valley this weekend, plan for significantly cooler temperatures than anything you experienced in April. Layers, a jacket. Warm weather Derby fashion is going to meet a cold front that has been chasing tornadoes across the plains all week. I want to pull back the curtain on something today that I think is the most important, and least understood, atmospheric story of 2026. Because the cold snap, the record April warmth, the 8-day severe weather siege, the extraordinary subtropical jet stream, the 6,000-mile Marshall Islands moisture pipeline, all of it traces back to a single source. And that source is in the Pacific Ocean. An increasingly extreme marine heat wave, which began to develop as early as late 2025 but has recently intensified and broadened even further during March and April 2026, is now becoming a major driver of conditions from Hawaii to Mexico to California and beyond. A vast region of the subtropical Pacific in the triangular region, approximately between Hawaii, the Pacific coast of Mexico, and central and southern California, is experiencing record-breaking sea surface temperatures. Nearly all recent days at the Scripps Pier in San Diego have been record warm, with 100% of days far above seasonal averages. Record-breaking ocean temperatures across the entire subtropical eastern Pacific. Every single day at the Scripps Pier running above previous records. This is not a local anomaly. This is a broad, deep, sustained marine heat wave covering millions of square miles of the Pacific Ocean. And here is the mechanism that connects this ocean heat to everything that has happened this spring. The subtropical jet stream, which typically weakens considerably by spring, has been driven to unusual persistence and strength by the warm ocean surface temperatures in this region. This has driven a notable sequence of events in the subtropical central and eastern Pacific, from persistent Kona lows in Hawaii, with record-shattering rainfall and flooding, to contributing to ridge building during the exceptional March heat episode, to now allowing for the persistence of an unusually active weather pattern to continue at the tail end of the California rainy season. The persistently overactive subtropical jet over the eastern Pacific is likely related to the extremely warm ocean surface temperatures, because this intensifies the local poleward sea surface temperature gradient. The warm Pacific Ocean is supercharging the subtropical jet stream. The supercharged subtropical jet stream is doing three things simultaneously: building ridges over the western U.S. that produce record heat, maintaining an unusually active storm track into California and the southwest late into spring, and driving the 6,000-mile moisture pipeline from the Marshall Islands to Texas that produced this week's flooding. All three of those phenomena, the March heat wave, the active California spring, the Texas flooding event, trace back to the same anomalously warm ocean. The latest coupled ocean atmosphere model update shows an extreme marine heat wave extending across the entire subtropical and tropical eastern North Pacific Ocean, including the entire California coastline, all of western Mexico and Central America, and Hawaii, through at least September 2026. Through at least September. This is not a temporary anomaly that is going to correct itself by summer. The ocean heat that is driving the subtropical jet anomaly is forecast to persist through the entire summer season, which means the atmospheric downstream effects, the ridge amplification, the moisture pipeline potential, the unusually active late-season weather patterns, are not going away. This is the piece of the puzzle that most weather coverage is missing entirely. The individual tornado outbreaks, the flooding events, the record heat waves, they are all symptoms. The Pacific marine heat wave is the cause, and it is not finished expressing itself. The cold snap arriving this week is real, it is significant, and it is going to surprise a lot of people. But it is also temporary. And behind it, starting in roughly 10 days to 2 weeks, the larger scale pattern reasserts itself. And the summer that is taking shape behind this cold snap is something I think the country needs to understand right now. Summer 2026. Weather predictions show hotter than normal temperatures across much of North America. In the United States, it is not just hotter, it is often drier too, with widespread dry conditions across many regions. The regional breakdown shows above normal temperatures across virtually the entire country, with below normal precipitation expected across the east, high plains, and interior west. Hotter than normal, drier than normal, across most of the United States for the entire summer. El Niño may reshape weather patterns across the United States during the second half of 2026. AccuWeather senior meteorologist Chat Merrill said, "The trends support El Niño developing late this spring to early this summer. The early start to El Niño can lead to an increase in moisture from the southern plains to the east coast during summer and fall. El Niño patterns could bring more rain than normal to the Colorado Basin, which would be welcome news for the ongoing drought. For parts of the west that have been very dry, that could be a step in the right direction. El Niño bringing some drought relief to the west and potentially to the southern plains. That is genuine good news buried in the summer outlook. The Colorado River Basin, the depleted reservoirs, the drought-stressed rangelands of Texas and Oklahoma, they may see some relief as El Niño develops through summer and fall. But for the central and eastern U.S., the summer picture is dominated by heat. Above normal temperatures from May through July across the plains, the south, and the east, on top of drought that already covers 61% of the lower 48, on top of soil moisture profiles that are already depleted, on top of a western snowpack at all-time record lows, on top of a Pacific marine heat wave that is amplifying every atmospheric extreme it touches. The NWS Rio Grande Valley noted a positive feedback loop between the heat and dryness, writing that there is a relationship between the heat and dryness, each amplifying the other. Given that Deep South Texas is under D3 extreme to D4 exceptional drought, the hot start to 2026 is an ominous sign for the summer and year ahead. Heat amplifies drought, drought amplifies heat. The feedback loop is established and running. And it is running in a year that started with the warmest 12-month period in 131 years of American climate records, the driest January-March in 131 years, the warmest March in 132 years, and a Pacific Ocean that is running at record warmth across millions of square miles. The cold snap this week is a brief interruption. The summer that follows it is going to be something people remember. I cannot close this video without bringing you current on Texas, because the flooding story is not over even as the cold front arrives. The WPC's excessive rainfall discussion from this morning confirms there is a marginal risk of excessive rainfall from central and southeast Texas to the central Gulf Coast today. Much of the rain expected along the southern tier will be falling over drought-ridden soil and will mostly be beneficial. However, with strong low-level flow transporting abundant Gulf moisture nearly parallel to the west-east slow-moving frontal boundary, storms will likely repeat over the same area. There remains an isolated threat for intense rain rates to lead to local flash flooding, a marginal risk for excessive rainfall across central and southeast Texas, today, right now. And the WPC's language is important here. Much of the rain will be mostly beneficial. They are acknowledging the drought context, the fact that the soil desperately needs this moisture. But they are also flagging the isolated flash flooding threat from intense rain rates on soil that, in some areas, has already been saturated by this week's earlier rain. The man who died on Salado Creek in San Antonio Monday, that death happened in a marginal risk environment. Not an enhanced risk, not a moderate risk, a marginal risk. I say this not to alarm people unnecessarily about today's marginal risk, but to make the point I have been making all week. No risk level is a license to drive through water-covered roads. Today's rain across Texas is mostly beneficial. It is helping the drought. It is replenishing reservoirs and soil moisture that have been depleted for months. But where it is intense and localized, where storms train over the same area and dump 2 to 3 inches in an hour on already wet soil, the flash flooding risk is real. Watch for flash flood warnings. Do not drive through any water-covered road regardless of how passable it appears. Let me give you the regional picture of this pattern shift because it means something different for every part of the country. For the Central Plains and Midwest, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. The cold front brings relief from the severe weather pattern. The active storm track retreats. The tornado watches and severe weather outlooks that have been a daily feature of life for the last 8 days give way to quieter conditions. But the cold snap is real. Temperatures 10 to 20 degrees below normal for the first days of May, with frost and potential freeze threat for early planted crops and gardens. Use this transition period to assess storm damage, prepare frost protection, and finally, get some rest. For the Ohio Valley, Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Derby weekend is going to be noticeably cool. The frost threat is significant for advanced phenological conditions, apple orchards in full bloom, early vegetable gardens, strawberry beds in active growth. Cover what you can, and monitor the NWS hourly forecasts through Sunday. For the Northeast, New York, New England, the Mid-Atlantic, a coastal low is delivering rain and wind this week. A developing upper-level low over the Great Lakes will drive a cold front and weak waves of low pressure across the eastern seaboard and Gulf Coast states over the next 24 to 36 hours. Behind the frontal passage, temperatures will drop noticeably, particularly in the interior northeast, where frost is still climatologically possible through mid-May in some locations. The warm April that felt like summer is ending. Dress accordingly. For the western U.S., while the eastern U.S. trends cooler, the western U.S. trends warmer the next few days. The ridge that is being displaced from the central U.S. is moving westward and building over the west, bringing another round of above-normal warmth to California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and the southwest. This is the ridge trough pattern that has defined this spring. Warmth amplifying over the west, while the trough drives active weather east. It is the same pattern that produced the record March heat wave. It is the same pattern that maintained the extraordinary subtropical jet stream. And it is reasserting itself after this week's cold air surge. For Texas, today's beneficial rains continue to provide drought relief, while the isolated flash flooding risk persists. The cold front passage over the next 24 to 48 hours brings significantly cooler temperatures, a dramatic change from the tropical humid air mass that fueled 8 days of severe weather. For the hill country specifically, the cold frontal passage reduces the flooding risk substantially as the moisture feed from the Gulf is cut off. But the rivers remain elevated and will take days to recede. Continue monitoring river gauges through this weekend. 8 days of continuous severe weather outbreak, the longest such sequence this country has seen in recent memory, is finally winding down as a cold front sweeps the central and eastern U.S. The active, tropical, storm-fueling air mass that gave this country 4 deaths, 28 confirmed tornadoes, an EF4, a PDS tornado warning at 11 p.m. in rural Arkansas, 9 inches of rain north of San Antonio, and a fatal flash flood on Salado Creek. That air mass is retreating. But what replaces it is not simply relief. It is a cold snap with temperature anomalies of 10 to 20 degrees below normal from the plains through the Appalachians, arriving at a moment when fruit orchards are in full bloom, early gardens are in the ground, and crops are emerging from soil that April's warmth encouraged people to plant weeks ahead of schedule. Even when the air feels comfortably warm on a sunny afternoon, the soil itself can still be cold enough to slow or stall plant growth. A last frost date is a historical average. There is still a chance of frost after the listed date. Patience in late April and early May almost always pays off. And behind the cold snap, the summer is building. The Pacific marine heat wave driving the extraordinary subtropical jet stream is forecast to persist through September. El Niño is developing at 85 to 94% probability with a strong event most likely. The Old Farmer's Almanac's summer 2026 forecast shows above normal temperatures across virtually the entire country with below normal precipitation across the east, high plains, and interior west. The drought covering 61% of the lower 48 is not going anywhere soon. The weather shift that is about to surprise everyone is not just the cold snap, it is the full trajectory of what comes next. The brief cold, then the returning warmth, then the summer heat building on drought-parched soil, then the El Niño amplifying everything it touches. The atmosphere does not take vacations. It does not exhale after a long spring the way the rest of us do. It just shifts modes. Stay aware. Cover your plants tonight. Watch the Derby weather. Check on your neighbors. And understand that what we experienced these past 8 days, extraordinary as it was, is not the climax of this year's weather story. It is the prelude. I'll see you in the next update.